you got to be very careful that whatever product you bring connects with the local culture.
Coffee.
I wish there was Coke.
Coke. It is a digitally native demographic like nowhere else, like young people and phones. We talk about it in India a lot, but I think that market is just so digital.
They're so well connected. When you go to a restaurant, before the meal comes, you're there for 10 minutes. Now you need to have a beverage for that consumption. There are a lot of opportunities of consumption. Build more petrol stations on the highways. Once that happens, the PFM starts coming in.
Percentage of road travel is very, very high. So we today have the privilege of talking to Mr. Kaul. When Channel Play was thinking about entering the Saudi Arabia market, one of the first things I did was to call on Mr. Kaul in Riyadh, and from there onwards we have been in ongoing conversation about what is so specific about this market which everyone is talking about. So today we thought that we will start from beyond the hype, as it were. We all know KSA is a fast growing market. Everyone in the region, perhaps in the world, is talking about it as one of the global sources of growth in the future. What I wanted to ask you, sir, was what are the big ways in which KSA is different from most markets, say India, say even UAE? What are some of the big things that people should realize in terms of actually crafting a strategy for this market?
Thank you, Suhas, for having me here. Actually, there is a lot of hype about Saudi, and everybody wants to crack that market. And people feel that the way UAE market is, Saudi is a reflection of that, which is not true.
Right.
Because the demographics are very, very different. In UAE, you have only 12 to 13% local population.
Right.
And rest are all expats coming from everywhere.
Right.
So the culture is very different.
Yeah.
Whereas in Saudi, it's only 65% is local.
Right.
So Saudi has its own culture.
Right.
So you got to be very careful that whatever product you bring connects with the local culture.
Right.
Okay, because people are very sensitive about their culture, though they are globally well connected.
Right.
But they also are coming from joint families. So the culture becomes extremely relevant for them. So companies who want to come need to be very careful that they don't thrust something on the population there, then it doesn't get accepted. So that's one thing that people need to be careful. There are a lot of shifts happening. As we all know, 2030 vision of MBS is taking Saudi to a different direction, and they want to reduce their dependence from oil to tourism. And a lot of initiatives are being worked out in that country. So the country is on a move.
Right.
Okay. But for the country to imbibe the change, I think a whole generation has to grow on that change.
Right.
Which means the education system, the infrastructure, everything has to now evolve.
Right.
So that local population becomes more involved with the businesses there. The big move that happened in Saudi is ladies have started going to work now, which means that there is going to be a huge demand on the ladies sector.
Right.
Because now they are not at home.
More disposable income.
Absolutely. So the products which are move around that ecosystem will have a lot more demand in the times to come.
Right.
Which would also mean that the mothers will have less time to spend at home.
Right.
Which also means that ready to eat, ready to drink category is going to grow significantly.
Right.
Young population, 60% less than 30. Ladies are going for work. A lot of infrastructure investments, so a lot of blue collar working coming there. So these are some of the parameters which are in favor of this.
Right.
But then there are inherent roadblocks also, because if you go to a supermarket, the category is flooded.
Right.
Everybody wants to come there.
Right.
So you need to be careful that you bring something unique on the table, which connects with the local population.
Yeah.
So you just can't bring another soft drink from somewhere and
Yeah.
launch it there.
Yeah.
So you got to be careful that when you bring a product, don't bring a Me Too product.
Correct.
So innovation,
Yeah.
I think, is key to success. Connect with the local culture, which gives you a license to operate.
Yeah.
So these are two things that you need to keep in mind. The cost of doing business in Saudi is very high.
Yes.
So anybody who comes there
Yeah.
needs to understand that it's going to take time to build the business. So do you have patience?
Right.
Okay, so it's not going to happen from first month, the first 6 months that you start hitting the volumes. It doesn't happen like
Right.
that. So innovation, culture, and how much patience you have. I
Right.
think if you don't have these three, just be careful
Yeah.
about what you do.
Well, this culture point is very interesting because when you mentioned it, and then I started reading more about what's happening there. Women's workforce participation not very different from India's anymore.
Yes.
The categories in which women are working very interesting, like in retail,
Yes,
high touch
absolutely.
categories. Uh, Also, the one thing that I found interesting there is that while this big shift is happening, it's also culturally very confident of itself as a
Absolutely.
society. Like the being like the West, there's a different equation with the culture of the West and Saudi culture than say what we have known in urban India. Back in the
True.
day.
I mean, they are very proud of themselves.
Right.
They really are proud of their culture, their historical space in the region, and they don't want to leave that.
Correct.
So while they are willing to imbibe the good things of Western culture,
Correct.
but they're not going to follow that blindly.
Correct.
So I think youth is looking forward, but at the same time is grounded.
Right.
So you cannot do anything which attacks the fundamental of
Yeah.
that boy or a girl,
Yeah.
because he respects his culture, he respects his
Yeah.
family traditions,
Yeah.
which is something which is different.
Yeah. So
Okay.
products need to find a story of being rooted.
Absolutely,
in-
absolutely. And also, it's a very culture sensitive market.
Yeah.
So you can't do anything which questions their belief,
Right.
which is very true. I mean, listen, when you go into a country, you got to respect
Correct.
that country.
Yeah.
And I think if we are able to do that, maybe you have a winning solution.
Correct. And the other thing we talked about, you mentioned then, and then I started noticing when I was, walking around Riyadh, is that it is a digitally native demographic like
Yes.
nowhere else. Like young people and phones. We talk
Oh,
about it in
yes.
India a lot, but I think that market is just
Yeah, I
So
mean,
digital.
they're so well connected.
yeah, probably one of the world's highest usage
Absolutely,
rates.
absolutely. They're well connected. They're exposed to global market. Gaming is a huge industry.
Gaming, yeah.
So if you're coming with a product which is focusing that age group, your digital marketing becomes extremely critical.
Yeah.
Your association with gaming in some way, if you have that product profile, is something that is going to help you. E-commerce is becoming a big.
Right.
It's still, I mean, depending on the category, between 5 to 18-20%,
Yeah.
but it's growing at 50-60%.
Yeah.
So my suggestion would be that if you're bringing a product, maybe the simpler route for you to go to the market is go the e-commerce way,
Yeah.
test the concept, see the consumer acceptance, and then take the bigger bet going offline through the brick and mortar structure of distribution, etc. Because entering a supermarket is extremely expensive.
Quite expensive.
Okay, so your exit barrier reduces if you test your product through the e-commerce route and see how the consumer acceptance is. Then accordingly decide what is your next step in terms of going to the market.
Yeah. Got it.
True.
One more thing that when I talk to people in India running businesses and thinking about Saudi Arabia is this almost unique value of partnerships.
Yes.
So obviously now you can go set up your company. You don't need to that's not the point. But still, plugging into that market requires you to very carefully identify whom are you partnering with in
Yes.
more so than say if someone's entering India. Uh, need for partnership in Saudi Arabia is
It's extremely critical because it's a big country.
right.
Okay, so even if you have a great product and a great concept, but if it doesn't reach the consumer through these outlets, so it's not going to work. Okay, and especially for the new companies which are coming, this is a huge overhead to build their own infrastructure. So you need a partner who can take you. And so there are big players, so
Right.
there are big distributors who would be there to help you. But you also need to have a very robust tech solution to monitor the performance.
Right.
Because if, as a brand owner, you feel that I invoice the partner and then I'm done, it's not going to work because that partner is big. He has his own priorities, he has his own businesses. So the next thing is that when you bring your product, as I said, relevance, etc., but you also need to have a very strong tech platform so that you're able to monitor your performance in the market and also simultaneously start collecting the consumer data.
Right.
And so a consumer focus technology solution and a go-to-market focused technology solution. I think if you have that along with the right concept, then you have the 360-degree covered.
Right.
And then I think you should be successful. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things I found interesting was that for whatever reason, if one is thinking that one's competitors in Saudi Arabia are not using too much tech or using tech of say, of a few years back, it's not so. That market, all companies, including Coca-Cola,
Yes.
all these companies, because at Channel Play we see this globally, and the manager's appetite for cutting edge tech in general is high. So the competition, whichever category you are in, I feel an incoming brand should be aware that whatever their competition is, has a lot of information about what's happening in the market.
Absolutely. See, if you draw a parallel in India, there used to be landlines.
Yeah.
And we straightway, I mean, we still had a very small penetration of land. We straight moved to mobile phones.
Yes, yes.
So it was a big leap forward. Similarly, Saudi, because it is going through the transformation, a lot of talent is coming from outside.
Right.
And they bring the technology
Correct.
and the thought process.
Yeah.
So the market is shifting significantly,
Yeah.
be it, especially in our field, be it your salesman's tracking,
Right.
performance, merchandising, your stock management, your promotions, everything is now, I mean, there are so many players who are coming to that market with
Yeah.
the technology solution that sometimes you feel, I mean, it's the same thing everybody is offering.
Correct.
So if you don't have a differentiated offering, then it's going to be difficult to even crack there because suddenly the whole world is coming there.
Correct.
So if you're a technology company, then the first thing is, what is different?
Yeah.
You might say, I'll give you 10% cheaper price. That's okay. But if you're not adding value to what I'm doing today or what technology is next door, then again, you have very little chance of
It's a value
success.
market.
Absolutely.
Though I also thought so that thinking price or cost is
important.
But it's a value.
If you have innovation, you can even charge a premium.
Correct.
Correct.
Coffee.
I wish there was Coke.
Coke. So, one question, Coke history, beverage. As beverage walas here, I have to ask you that the Indian shelf is going insane on, the beverage shelf. There's so many, around every month I see a new brand, the whole energy drink thing happening, juices, protein, probiotic, prebiotic, so much action. What's the beverage scene in KSA? I've not specifically looked into that. And obviously, even if I had, you are the right person to answer that question. What's happening in the Middle East and beverages?
No, the per cap consumption is huge.
Right.
Okay. And people drink a lot of beverages. And, if you take the Saudi market, it has two spectrum. One is blue collar workers, okay, and the top of the income group. So you got to decide where do you want to operate. Because in the lower sector, it is price driven,
Right.
okay, which is very critical for them.
That's the
benefit.
diaspora.
And that's the benefit that, like if you take energy drink,
Right.
without taking the brand name, before the excise duty came, some of the brands were 75% market share. And then the excise duty came, which was 100% on energy drink. And then started a lot of local players started coming in.
Right.
So today you get a 250 ml energy drink for 2.5 riyal, 3 riyal, and that is booming.
Right.
Because that's also a source of energy for the blue collar workers.
Right.
But at the same time, on the other side of the spectrum, there are functional drinks
Right.
which address a specific need.
Right.
So you got to decide where do you want to operate. This is volume game, that is value game.
Right.
Okay, but both sectors are going at a very high pace. And in this, the HORECA channel, which is because eating out is very big in Saudi.
Yeah.
And now with ladies going to work, that's only going to increase.
Nuclearization is happening.
Absolutely, absolutely. So something which goes well with the food, that is where Coke comes. But that segment is also increasing. People are willing to experiment. So Coke is introducing some new products there to match those. One very good consumption occasion that we have identified is when you go to a restaurant, before the meal comes, okay, you're there for 10 minutes. Now you need to have a beverage for that consumption.
Right.
Okay, so that is the consumption pattern that one is looking at. So I'm saying there are a lot of opportunities of consumption, and it's growing. It's significantly growing.
Right.
And which also means that it's attracting a lot of new commerce to come into the segment. So a lot of new brands are coming.
Yeah.
But innovation is what you're looking at.
Right.
So on the lower segment, benefit with price is the key driver. Other segment, what are the benefits that you're offering? And for that, the consumer is willing to pay the premium.
Right.
So, but the overall water consumption, bottled water consumption is very high. People are experimenting, drinking the standard beverages. So it's pretty exciting time for beverages.
Yeah.
But it's also very confusing because if you go to a shelf of beverage in a supermarket, if you have not decided what you want to buy, and you want that I'm going to stand in front of the shelf and then decide what I'm going to buy, you will get confused.
Yeah.
Because there is so much of variety.
There is.
So your product attributes have to stand out.
I think it was also when we met, and I found it very useful. So maybe, in a wider sense, when you described the lay of the land as far as the channel goes, and you spoke of the supermarkets, the discounters, the mini markets, and like if you may, if you would please.
Yeah, I mean, depending on the product category, supermarkets are about 18 to 20% of the category.
Right.
For us, HORECA, which is eating, is huge.
Right.
It's about 35% of the category. So supermarkets play a very significant role, and that also offers you a platform to interact with the consumer.
Right.
And if you're a new brand, if you're there, you can, put visibility and have promoters to talk to the consumer.
Right.
Eating out is becoming big, so HORECA is another big channel. Now there's a new channel which is emerging, which is discounters, which is something between a wholesale and a supermarket.
Right.
So they have the look and feel of a supermarket,
Right.
but their pricing is like a wholesale pricing.
Right.
See, Saudi is a huge market.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult for a company to reach everywhere.
Yeah.
So the wholesale channel is very, very critical because that is when, it supplements your distribution in the market and certain remote areas where you can't go yourself. So I would say supermarket, wholesale channel, discounters, and e-commerce.
Right.
Depending on what your offering is and where is your product on the life cycle, you choose from this. But these are the big players that you have. Petrol station is very, very underdeveloped right now. But I think there's a lot of focus to build more petrol stations on the highways.
Yeah.
Once that happens, the PFM starts coming in.
Yeah.
And that becomes very, very interesting. So all the channels, as the consumption grows, the consumer wants it next door.
Yeah.
So all the channels are growing significantly, but the wholesale discounters are growing much faster.
Right.
Because it gives you wide range of distribution, e-commerce, because of the convenience that it is offering. So depending on a product, you decide what channel. But again, this, as we were talking about, anybody who wants to come there, they need to be very clear. Who is the consumer? Where does that consumer shop?
Yeah.
And then go to that channel.
Yeah.
A lot of times we get carried away. 100,000 outlets, I'm going to go everywhere.
Yeah.
So be very careful.
Yeah.
Okay, based on your consumer, decide your channel. Based on the channel, decide your pricing, and then your offerings. So got to do a little bit of strategic thinking on
Yeah. I really, that point about petrol pumps, they would call them gas stations, right? So the gas station channel, some version of the convenience channel. What I was thinking about that as a country at this GDP per capita, this scale, the percentage of road travel is very, very high.
Yes.
And obviously, as the nature of economy shifts, more and more people will travel more and more. And it is likely that they'll be traveling by road.
Yes.
And as this network comes up, this channel will become more salient. The other interesting thing I thought about it later was when I was trying to connect it to the nuclearization point. That as families live in different places,
Yes.
overall need to travel goes up, and you're traveling by road, stopping here. And therefore, if this channel, if your product fits it, a very careful single serve strategy, whatever your category, probably is the way to think of that.
Absolutely. I mean,
Smaller pack sizes and such.
yes, except for water.
Yeah.
They will buy a 6-pack or a 12-pack because the family sizes are also bigger than normal. So there you can still go with that. But for a beverage, single serve is becoming extremely critical. I think the trend that will emerge in future would be that these PFMs could also become dark stores.
Huh.
So
Interesting.
they could then become dark store for today, you drive in, you buy petrol and you go in and you take a burger and then you buy a drink and then you go.
Right.
But there is a population that's coming in that area and they want bigger pack.
Right.
So I see the model will shift in a way that back end they will have multi-packs, but in the shelf on the PFM they'll have single serve.
And they'll become dark stores because they'll be wider than other channels.
Exactly. And as the e-commerce grows, that culture is going to go there also.
Right.
And then people would like to call on phone.
Right.
So they become dark store for offline distribution.
Yeah.
Where multi-serves will come into play, but single serves will be as the consumer drives in. So single serve would be your value proposition because the consumer is willing to pay a premium on that. Whereas dark stores will become your volume proposition. So that's how I think is going to evolve. So, and if you see in Saudi, number of petrol stations, say per kilometer, is much, much lower than what you find in UAE.
Right.
So with a huge country and with a huge population, I think that's next channel after discounters. That's the next channel that's going to grow.
Right.
And that's where then the dark store plus the front end as a single serve, that combination model will start working.
Right. This question is more related to channel play and not to Saudi Arabia. I mean, some of these young people would be going to Saudi Arabia, but I wanted to take this opportunity for you to share some thoughts, thinking of you coming out of IIM Ahmedabad back in the day, this rich, illustrious journey. But if you had that classic question of giving yourself advice, speaking to your younger self in a way that we would love to share with young management trainees and not just management trainees, all young managers at Channel Play. So kind of, if I may ask you to look back and have a bit of a conversation with your just
Younger
out of
self.
IIM Ahmedabad self.
I think it's like, any other profession. You have to find your passion point.
Right.
You have to love what you're doing. And if you don't love it, get out. do something else. So it's
Right.
very critical for young generation to find out what they really want to do. So find your passion point.
Right.
Invest in yourself. Okay, the technology is changing very fast.
Right.
So keep yourself ahead of the curve. So once you have your passion point, once you understand the technology, and keep learning,
Right.
because that never stops.
Right.
So if you can get these three combination, I think, and work in channel play. That's a beautiful company.
So, yeah.
So if you can get that right, not that not everybody can't come and work in channel
Yeah,
play,
yeah.
but I'm sure there is
Yeah.
a lot of others in the ecosystem. So if you get that right, and there is no harm taking a mid-career decision and saying, you know what, I'm going to change into this now.
Right.
So don't be scared of taking such decisions,
Right.
because on a 40-year work span, it's okay to go wrong sometimes,
Yeah.
and you learn from
Right.
there. But if you decide, you know what, this doesn't excite me anymore, don't keep on doing it.
I think that's
So
a good
change
point.
the track, and then you'll go wherever you want to go.
So, this critical question of brand trying to enter KSA, and these days things have to be put as 5 things.
Yes.
Like, I'll do it. Think product for the market. Think through your product. It can't be just that everyone's going there. Let me go in.
Absolutely.
Think culture. It is a distinctive culture. It is a culture very confident of itself. Think channel.
Absolutely.
Think partnerships.
Yes.
Think technology.
Absolutely.
It is most likely more technologically advanced, your category, other players, competition, than what you are thinking.
Absolutely.
So those 5 things, I think, summarize
Absolutely.
the
I mean,
checklist.
if you could go through that, and I would say a sixth element would be have patience.
Patience.
I think that's very, very critical.
Yeah.
Yes.
Patience, and therefore also linked to perhaps be aware that it's a higher cost of doing business.
Absolutely. Yes.
So 7. All right then. Thank you, boss. That was lovely.
Thank you very much for
and-
having me here.
Yes, thank you for all the advice. It has been a pleasure.
Good luck and see you in Middle East.
Yes, boss.
Take
See you
care.
there.
Take care.